One, two, three. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Top Shelf Fandom. This is episode 9 of the Storyteller series, Ridley Scott, how Ridley Scott does story. I'm here with J.R. Raleigh from Geek Chat 1. If you'd like to introduce yourself, I'm so happy to have you here to talk about Ridley Scott. Tell the folks where they can find you.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me on. I'm JR from Geek Chat 1, and we have an online community on Facebook inside of a group, and we talk about geeky stuff all day long, including director's film, comic books, everything else. And so this one's kind of right up my alley. I love Ridley Scott and talking about the way he makes films and how he is behind the camera. So I'm really excited about this. And you can always find me on Geek Chat 1 on pretty much anything, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, everywhere. So, man, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm really pleased that you picked. That's why I gave you a pick of directors, and you picked Ridley right away. Because me and you, I don't know you as well as I know some of the other guests. So I know that also you cover a broad spectrum of fandom and film and television on your channel, which is something I really appreciate. You're not getting put into this little niche. Baby's not being put into a corner, so I wasn't well, I wasn't sure which one you'd pick, so it was a good sign when you right away you're like Ridley Scott. I'm like, awesome, because part of the fun of this for me and hopefully the people watching is we get to actually identify the full filmography, all these projects that these directors have done, and try to identify some techniques and styles that we can kind of look at and say, oh, this is a Ridley Scott film, which this might be the hardest director so forth to do, but he is definitely
known for one thing. I think it absolutely is.
Yeah, I couldn't pin it. There's no Spielberg stare with Ridley, but we've got some pretty base questions here at first, just for you, JR. What would you say if I asked you about identifying theme or stylistic choices that would let an audience know that a film is directed by Ridley Scott, which we just kind of touched on, but if you had to take your best shot at it?
Because he's a chameleon. This is something we were talking about before the show. He's such a chameleon on stuff. But if you keep chiseling down to the bottom level of what he does and how it affects the way he tells a story, I would say that his use of lighting and of smoke or fog or any other practical effect on set to frame it into a larger set piece, because he's big on big set pieces, big designs. But he narrows the focus on the person into a frame shot when they're talking or reacting to something happening. And I'd say that's probably the key one. If you think about some of the early on shots in his career, if you're talking about like Duelist or Aliens, you see it a lot, that it's very pronounced, and it sort of gets refined as his career progresses.
Yeah, absolutely. You can kind of cite Denis Villeneuve, because Denis Villeneuve kind of cites obviously Scott, because Denis Villeneuve is a director that stepped in for the latest Blade Runner and was trusted to do that film. Scott was doing Covenant, I believe, at the time. A oversaturated color palette, and then having certain blues or oranges just pop to identify sentiment, to identify the emotional state of the character. You know, this is a visual medium, and I think that Scott, first off, born in 1937, let's just give the guy his due. What is he, 82, 83 right now? He's been doing this for a long time. His filmography is very impressive, but he also did go to school for design, and he went to the Royal Academy of Arts, and he graduated there with a design degree, and he is obviously a visual storyteller. And this is what's so amazing about this series, is you can learn that it's not just all about what's on the script, and it's not just all about put the camera here and tell the actors what to do. There's so much that goes into this.
One of the funny things is going back to his schooling, his education, is he can block and light an entire shot and scene on a piece of paper. Like there's drawings of the spaceship in Aliens, and every basic angle of it, with the hallways and corridors all the way around the Nismo. And he blocked all of the shots and angles that he wanted to take on all of it, all on paper. So before he even steps foot onto the set, he already knows what he wants. And it makes for timely filming and fast-paced, fast-moving filming, which is why studios like him. He can produce really fast.
Yeah, he's an efficient filmmaker. He has that in common with Spielberg there, very efficient. And like you said about his blocking and staging, blocking is where the characters go. Staging is where the stuff behind them in the forefront background goes, and it's very important in film. But he does this the old school way too. He draws it.
Yep.
Yeah, he doesn't use any of the
storyboard. This is more the technical aspect. So you're basically looking at a 3D print of the ship and everything that he wants to film on it, including like I said, the corridors and hallway shots. So he knows he can get a long shot over here with backlighting here and top light here to focus it in on the actor or actress and highlighting their face and the emotion reaction. And you see that a lot, especially in Aliens.
Oh, absolutely. And I think there's an argument. I bet you could take a bad screenplay with a really good director and make it a better film than a bad director with a good screenplay, because a visual medium is all about the person that's putting the aspect ratio, that's getting there in the frame
Correct.
in those shots. I mean, you could really
And the
mess a movie
score.
up.
His work with Hans Zimmerman or Zimmer is just amazing, and those scores that he's put out. This is like talking about Gladiator and Black Hawk
Mhm.
Down. I think it was another Hans one, and that score is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, knowing to go to the right people. So, when I asked you about your favorite Scott film and what he means to you as a filmmaker, you cited Black Hawk Down, also one of my favorites. If you wanted to speak a little bit about Black Hawk, and then we'll kind of go in a semi-linear, as much as Top Shelf Fandom stays in a linear fashion with his filmography, and
Right.
talk about the Duelist. But I really do want to talk about Black Hawk Down at the onset here.
So Black Hawk Down for me, and the reason that I chose that as being the number one is it was very topical when it came out. It came out just after 9/11, so there was a lot of high raw emotion going on in the U.S. at the time. I was active duty in the Marine Corps at the time and watched that film. I had read the book previously, and if you haven't read the book, you should. It's really good. It's told from the Rangers' perspective because Delta Force wasn't allowed to speak to the media on the mission that they were on or the reason that they were there. So there's a little bit of discrepancy in the movie between things that happened and the reason why things happened. But for what story was told to Mark Bowden, who wrote the book, he was a journalist from Philadelphia who started digging into this and researching it and interviewing the Rangers that were in Somalia. He What Ridley Scott did was accurate to the information that he had historically, is what I'm trying to say. Is it overall like completely accurate? No, because they didn't have the ability to talk to Delta at the time. But because of the success of the movie and that book, Mark Bowden did later speak with a bunch of Delta Force operators that were working in South America, and he released another book, Killing Pueblo, which is about the cartel overlord Pablo. Why can't I think of his last name right now?
Escobar, the Medellin.
Escobar. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the assist on that one. Pablo Escobar, and unfortunately, he kind of broke the rules of trust, and he's been excommunicated out of the Special Forces community, out of Delta. They'll never talk to him again. So it's kind of unfortunate, but it's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes.
But it sounds like, and this is coming from somebody that has served themselves. You're saying that he stuck to the source material, and the source material
Correct.
came from somebody that had boots on the ground, right?
Yes, it did.
So what more could you ask? I really find it to be a very entertaining movie, which is important, but also a meaningful movie, especially in that time, because it does forecast, unfortunately, a lot of the conflicts that we will be in. Also, it's not a glorification or glamorized version of war. I've never
No.
been in war, but I look at this movie and I see situations in which I feel on the edge of my seat, not because something's going to blow up, but because concrete's chipping up and hitting them. As you really feel like, for the best of my knowledge, you can kind of put yourself there, which I think is important, and think, holy shit, yeah, it's getting real. And this is very dangerous, and they're not just these alpha dudes that are gonna have everything taken care of. Nothing's This isn't,
I think it was Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen.
yeah, like the guys with a bunch of machine. No, it's like they're very efficient, brave, real dudes that are out there, and women getting it done, and in some pretty dire straits. So we'll come back and circle around to every single one of these that I've done. There's always been a film on here that's been one of my favorites in the filmography that I was not aware that the director in which we're covering was the actual director for. So this was a big standout for me, and it's one of my favorites as well. And it shows his versatility, because let's go to The Duelist. The Duelist is the probably most hyperbolic response to a slight in history. A story about a gentleman that really can't let something go. But this film, I had been introduced to it through YouTube clips by my older brother, like maybe 7 years ago. But you have a lot more information on this. As Harvey Keitel is in this.
This makes sense, especially when we talk about later films, like especially Gladiator and Black Hawk Down. This is his first foray, so this is his first film. This is what got his career started and launched for the most part, right? And he the Duelist is the gold standard in Hollywood of sword fighting. It's incredibly well choreographed. Prior to this film, Hollywood kind of had a permanent swordsman that worked for the studio, and they kind of just went through the motions and did it. Talking back with like Errol Flynn, and while it was good swordplay, it wasn't particularly accurate or actually things you would do in sword combat. This kind of zapped that out though, because this just pushed. I mean, it's right in your face too. I mean, it's very prevalent throughout the entire film of what's going on with the sword fighting. And back when he was growing up in the 50s, probably, and into the 60s, there wasn't great sword fighting, and so I always wondered if this was something that interested him growing up that he wished was done better, and that's why he chose to hire the people that he did, because he got William Hobb, who's a sword master, and Hobb had 11 films to his credit already as a choreographer, stunt coordinator, fighting, everything. And he would actually later be one of the key players for choreographing HBO's Game of Thrones for the swords fights and that. And I didn't even know that until I started doing research on this. Funny enough, because obviously we both love Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Chaplin of the Los Angeles Times was actually quoted as saying, the sword fights were the best I had ever seen, and called the story refreshingly different from the standard film content. And that speaks volumes on a freshman film coming in and having a critic come back and say that. Like, it was uncanny, because critics are critics.
They tend to be quite critical. What I find fascinating,
totally.
What I find fascinating about this is, because I agree with you, that it's ballsy. Okay, because this film, first off, it's a period piece. I'm a big Napoleonic War an enthusiast, I guess would be appropriate to call, but it's really not like the most known time. If you're looking at high concept, you would maybe want to do something that was like an Arthurian tale, or something that is more Renaissance, or like anything that is more recognizable to a wider audience. But he mixes in this gritty sword play, because it's not sword play, it's sword fighting. And yeah, they don't spin their swords around. Fights they're very short, because that's how that would usually be, and it's gritty, and he really makes it a personal, I would say semi petty feud between these two gentlemen that spans 15 years. But if you want to see some realistic sword fighting, at least for films, because like you were saying, JR, I would imagine this was usually just handled by the stunt people, which you can learn stage fighting. You can take classes for that. I've actually had and stuff like that. It teaches you how to do fighting for the stage and stuff like this. But he really mixed in even HEMA enthusiasts today, or some at School Gladiatoria and all that, will praise this film. So if you got them on its side, it's something good. But I think this is a really fun film.
He was joining in the conversation and saying that this is some of the best swordplay you'll ever see. You might want to listen, because the HEMA guys and gals that fight in that are very, very proficient in traditional fighting, and that's what they do. That's how they're sparring. It's a traditional form and style. So I mean, them saying that is a big deal.
Yeah, it of course it has some inaccuracies and stuff like that, but yeah, you got those guys and gals on your side, then you're doing something right, because what their channels essentially are, and they're pretty entertaining to watch, is shitting on most sword fighting that's depicted.
Right, all the ones previous to, I mean, that's kind of not a very high mark for that, because when he did it, they all made that the gold standard. So it's saying a lot right there.
Yeah, and it's it really shows the brutality of it and the realism of it. So I really think it's definitely a standout film, because it's what breaks him in. He only did, I think it's called The Boy on the Bicycle. It was a student film, but this is his first feature, and right. Yeah, I mean, it's a ballsy move. And then when you go to his next film, which is Alien, you start to see that just known as a certain type of filmmaker. I am not the biggest fan of the Alien trilogy. But I can definitely respect what it did. If you wanted to speak a little bit about what this meant for film, obviously some influence from Kubrick here, right? And obviously this is a landmark film on a lot of different levels. I mean, personally, it's not my forte, but that doesn't really matter. That's just my opinion.
This one's a great follow up for his sophomore one because he knocks this one out of the park. Now, granted, at the time it was released in '79, so you're only 2 years ish out of Star Wars, and he jumped on this story immediately following the release of Star Wars because Star Wars was unique in the fact that it brought mainstream or sci-fi to the mainstream. It made it palatable for everybody, and everybody was starting to wonder. I mean, we're at the top of the space race. We've been to the moon at this point. What's next to the stars? Ad Astrada, and everything that goes along with it. So it was a perfectly timed film for him, but then he just crushed it. Many people, and myself included for a long time, thought that Ridley Scott had written and directed this. He didn't. This was written by Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shusett, who also wrote such great films like Total Recall, Alien versus Predator, Heavy Metal. So these are really well-known screenwriters at the time. And Ridley just kind of jumped on and signed on for as director for it. He actually abandoned a Tristan and no, not Tristan. We're not in Westeros. Tristan and Isolde tale,
Yeah.
abandoned that one completely and jumped on Aliens to go ahead and produce it. But it really opened up sci-fi to the mainstream, and it allowed studios to go ahead and make the gamble on the box office to see what would happen after Star Wars. Everybody really wanted a space movie kind of set up like this. And once again, the way he framed these shots and the way that it's almost like a mathematical equation, and the way that he frames and the way that he lights. And this is pretty much the highlight of it right here, because right from his freshman film, boom, into this one, and you immediately get sucked into this world. It's believable. It's understandable, and you don't know what's going on. And it's perfect.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I appreciate Alien. I just am not. I know that the fandom for it is vast, and they're very dedicated, and rightfully so. It's just not my cup of tea. But I can say that he made a film here that if he would have went with Tristan and Isolde, then which he was like, James Franco's not alive yet. Let me wait a few years and get him later on. Yeah, he's like, the Franco must come first. But anyways, if he would have made that Tristan and Isolde, then he would have definitely been putting himself in a corner. It would have been somewhat similar to The Duelist. As we'll see, it'll be vastly different. But if people were looking at it from the outside in, they'd be like, oh, same type of,
It puts it into another period piece.
Yeah, there's swords in it, so it's fantasy. It's not taking time there in our time, so it's period. Blah blah blah. But he does Alien, and Alien though sets itself apart though from Star Wars, in a good way. It's in space, but it's really not like Star Wars, which is really important because a lot of people were trying to copy Star Wars at this time.
Yeah, this is almost breaking into space horror, and it's kind of the film that really started that genre, where you end up with George R. R. Martin writing things like Night Flyers, which he didn't write until after this film was out, but probably took some stylistic cues from it and then put his own story to it. As we know, Martin is really good at doing that. But this is really kind of the film that made space horror. If you wanted another contemporary film that would be somewhere on par with this, Event Horizon it is in that story. I mean, in the ballpark there. I mean, at least you have a space horror going on. And that's kind of what it is, because it's a mix between sci-fi and a horror movie.
Well, what I like about it is that, like I said, you could have easily been just put forth as this type of filmmaker, that type of filmmaker, but even within these genres, he manages to separate himself, because then we run into Blade Runner, which is a fascinating film, and it's something that also, when people are looking at it from face value and saying, I guess he's in the now sci-fi type of films, he does help usher in the used Earth Trope, which is pretty much we use up all the resources on Earth, and there's that dark dystopian future. Also 20 minutes into the future type of trope where it's not that far, but it's far enough that things have changed quite significantly. One of my favorite films. This is based off a fantastic. The source material is "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?" This is all very Westworld, and Westworld is all very "Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?" Pretty much questioning what makes you human, what makes you real, what is the
Philip K. Dick has a bunch of movies, and people don't know what the source material is, but there's quite a few movies that are Andy K. Dick stories, and this being one of them, obviously. Electric Sheep. Total Recall is based on a adaptation, which is why I talked about earlier about the writers that worked on these different projects. So it's kind of funny that they keep kind of coming back with him. And
in Total
Scott,
Recall, yeah, Total Recall is, I believe, directed by Ridley's brother Tony,
yes,
who is no longer with us. He had cancer and unfortunately passed in 2012. So it's kind of a sad ending to that one. But he kind of was put into a corner, stereotyped, classified, whatever you want to call it, as a certain type of filmmaker, the big action blockbuster. And I believe he's the one that did Total Recall. So even these other scripts were kept within the family. Sorry to interrupt you there.
No, totally. It's absolutely topical for the conversation. But this was Total Recall was again done by O'Banion and Shusett. So it's funny that these same names keep popping up with these stories, but they're Andy K. Dick adaptations, which was great.
Yeah, and you get a sense that they know they're going to write something for somebody that's going to be able to then adapt it to screen. There's the screenplay, and then there's that storyboarding process in which we were talking about before. So when you see somebody has this technical prowess and has this, background in photography, graphic design, even product design, as we'll get into with Apple and stuff like that. That's what he went to school for. It's not, they just say it's a degree in design, but that's product design, that's graphic design, and so forth, and commercial design. So he has all these talents. So I think that it's like it goes hand in hand, and one serves the other. That you have writers that will work with directors, throughout their careers because they know that they complete them per se. They can pull it off. Which I'd have to say, Blade Runner is quite ambitious. All right, there was rumors on set that Harrison Ford didn't quite get it. And that's not the first time. Again, Harrison Ford, I love him, but I think he's kind of always been a grumpy old stoner, even before he was an old man. He's always been a little bit difficult.
Right, and I would have a tendency to agree with that.
Yeah, I like Harrison, but yeah, I could see him just showing up a little bit hungover and being like, I don't get this. You got to have trust. It's a little bit off topic, but that Mad Max Fury Road Hardy and Theron had no clue what the fuck was going on in that whole time they're filming, but they're like, gotta trust it. You know what I mean? Gotta trust the product. So yeah, I could see this being a little bit of a leap of faith for some of the actors, but I think that he definitely pulls it off. But he doesn't pull it off right away, and this seems to be an ongoing trend with Ridley. This movie was not critically, nor did it do well at the box office. It was not well received on either sides. And this is where I want to kind of talk about the director's cut, which you mentioned in the notes.
The director's cut is really interesting here. So the studio, on about the 20th anniversary, I think, made a director's cut, and Ridley Scott had thought that the original was pretty flawless, and that the additions were merely a marketing tool to sell the 20th anniversary. And he didn't return to Aliens until 30 years later with Prometheus. And, a lot of people think that Aliens was directed by Ridley Scott. It's not, and neither is the follow-on for Aliens to round out the trilogy. And then he comes back for Prometheus, and Alien Covenant is the only other two Aliens that he was involved with. Even though he brought these characters to lives and established, an amazing, strong female character in Sigourney Weaver playing Ripley, the rest of her story isn't even told by Scott. So I always found that I find that kind of interesting, because I didn't know that for a long time. I thought Aliens, which is my favorite one in the trilogy, because it's got Space Marines. Who doesn't love Space Marines? I still want to be a Space Marine. If they ever get us, exosuits, I'm in.
Hurry up, Elon. Hurry up.
Right?
Yeah, I can't argue with it. The Expanse even makes me want to sign up, and also I don't think it'll happen, so I don't have to risk going fancy. But yeah, I could just get the glow. Oh, I want to go so bad. They're like, oh, we got it ready. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm gonna make some.
Oh, oh crap.
Oh man, yeah. So we see this, revolution, and then we see this DVD commentary in which he really takes to talking about his projects, and we see different iterations of his work come out and be more successful after the fact. I feel like the 80s kind of has this happen a lot. Scarface did really bad too, you know what I mean? I still think it's kind of like a shit. It's like such like a popcorn fun movie. It's kind of a shit like you're gonna look at it critical sense, but it's a lot of fun. But these films come out and they bomb in the box office for some reason. But then, when they start doing re-releases and anniversaries, like you're speaking of, they have a resurgence. And sometimes it doesn't pay to be ahead of your time. Usually, in the time.
Well, I think Alien and Blade Runner both fall into the cult classic kind of realm, and it's because of the style of movie that it is. They call it neo noir, and I think cyberpunk. When I think of Blade Runner, I think of cyberpunk. I don't think neo noir.
Yeah,
But and it's kind of got both those monikers. It's people think it's both, and sure, it's both. It was originally cited as neo noir, but I think it transcended into cyberpunk and kind of became that own niche in there. Other movies that were written. This is written by David Peoples, and he wrote 12 Monkeys, Unforgiven, Soldier, Kurt Russell movie. If anybody remembers that one from the 90s, it really got panned at the box office, but it was actually really good. I enjoyed it.
mm-hmm.
Total Recall, the original 90s release. Hard Boiled, which is a John Woo film, and Chow Yun Fat stars in it. And if you haven't seen Hard Boiled, go and watch it. Do yourself a favor. It's Chinese produced, so it's subtitled, but it is absolutely amazing. And John Woo, of course, later goes on to do Face Off, which is another neo noir style film. Fight Club is in the mix. Departed, Pulp Fiction. I mean, they're all kind of in that same neo noir genre. And then you have The Matrix, which is more on the cyberpunk side of Blade Runner. The dystopian world that they're living in and having to do things and create things that may or may not turn on them.
Yeah, I mean, neo noir is just an adaptation of film noir, which is, you always have your detective going out, and it's usually their last case, and it deals with a lot of contrast with good and evil and a lot of gray areas. And film noir itself utilized the lack of a budget and simplistic lighting, that they could use one lighting set set up for all of the shots. But yeah, I mean, I think that most of the time you're gonna have, when you start to just put titles on things, it gets very subjective. And I agree with you. I mean, I think that a lot of times cyberpunk is just gonna naturally follow along with neo noir. Or fantastical noir is like what The Expanse is considered. And it's like a very, I don't even get, like, they just need to stop making titles for these things at this point. It's like, we get
right, stop making up new genres, just put it into category.
Just let people decide for themselves. But I guess, hey, we gotta catalog stuff. So after
Right.
Blade Runner, though, what we do see is this is now a huge commercial. And if you have even seen a lot of movies that have used this is a 1984 Apple Macintosh commercial. This is like, it's kind of parodied a lot now, but he comes on and does this huge, there's a very big budget for this commercial, but this is not his first foray into actual commercial work. He had been doing it for a while because he realized when he was working for the BBC, doing a few of his television series and stuff like that, and in all of the burdens of being on a episodic, serial show where you have to have that turnaround rate that's just crazy. He went out and he spoke about how he figured that he could make more money, and not figured, he found out he could make more money in one night, doing a commercial than he could do for a season of whatever he was helping on, at that point. So like, he had always appreciated the medium of, widely syndicated commercials, because they also were helping him further knock down the door and get himself into Hollywood, because commercial work, and a lot of big producers have done this, and directors have used commercials, because commercials are seen by who? Pretty much everybody. They definitely get out to a wider audience than a film does. Spike Lee, in last week's episode, we saw he did the Nike commercial with Jordan, and so forth. Is there anything you want to add on this? This feels very Blade Runner-ish, right? Very neo-noir.
Blade Runner-ish.
Yeah.
It was, at the time, it was right up his alley. So, I mean, he does Aliens, and then does Blade Runner, and then falls into this one, which is playing with the concept of Big Brother and IBM being Big Brother, and he's being paid by Macintosh and Apple to make this one. It was kind of the first battle between IBM and or PC and Apple, right?
Yeah.
And we know now in the end that IBM and Microsoft won the opening battle against Apple, but the future is completely up for grabs. And I love the 1984 use here, right? Be huge fan of Orwell. I love the book 1984. And it has that entire vibe to it the entire time because they're playing with the concept of Big Brother and everything else. And I love dystopian books, movies, and everything else. I eat them up, like Brave New World, which is kind of where I think we're at right now, sadly
Yes,
enough.
yes, yes. Oh, thank you. I love Brave New World. And just a segue here, I got a affiliate partnership with Audible. And please, guys, if you're gonna get the free month trial, please use the link that'll be below with all of JR's links and all that. Please support both of us. But there's gonna be a new link down there for you guys for the Audible partnership that I have that will help the channel.
1984, any of the dystopian ones I could recommend. But if you want a current one, check out Red Rising by Pierce Brown. It's one that I'm going to start covering heavily on my channel. I absolutely love it. Go and check it out. In fact, I'm wearing my Howler shirt today that I got made. So yeah, and I think Red Rising's even behind me.
So get the audiobook through my Audible link and then go to JR for his coverage of it. So yeah, perfect world. It works out.
Perfect. It's a beautiful match.
I'd like to think that when they went to Ridley and they said, "Hey, so you want to do an Apple commercial?" and they'd be like, "Yeah, I'll do it." They're like, "So how are you gonna do it? They're gonna do it like a normal?" He's like, "No, the opposite of a normal commercial, like the complete opposite of anything you've ever
Just
seen."
the conversation is like,
Yeah.
okay, we just trust you, just do it. Like I don't know what they would have been like back in the day with the great and powerful Woz and Steve Jobs and everybody else at Apple going, just do it.
And speaking about, I don't know what he did, Legend. Now, this is probably one of the lower quality films, but I will say that some of the visual effects in this, and I know you're a big Witcher guy, I thought that the CGI fell really short after the cold open. I felt like it dropped the Xena warrior princess, and I think they need to fix that. That's neither here nor there, although I just put it here. My bad. But I watched some clips. I watched some clips of Legends, and it's somebody that you are more. I think you're better versed in that area than I am. What do you think about the visual effects in this? This has Tom Cruise in it.
With this one, like I remember seeing this when I was like 5 or 6 or 7, somewhere in there, and I'm still just blown away. But that was the standard at the time. So while and it wasn't special effects, this is all practical effects. This is, we're not what I call the transition from practical into complete computer generation and everything else and special effects. I always cite Jurassic Park as the bridge. That was the last big film that used a lot of special effects, CGI, married and partnered with practical effects. So that's kind of we're halfway to the promised land of CGI with this movie. So it's a lot more practical effect based. But man, I loved this movie growing up. It was absolutely amazing. And it was just scary enough. Like Legend kind of falls into the category of never ending story.
Yeah.
It's fantasy and it's kid fantasy, but it's not kid fantasy. It kind of bridges this odd gap because this was an instant cult classic. And it still is today. I mean, people love this film. And there's a reason. I mean, and you have Tim Curry. You can never go wrong with Tim Curry, especially playing the devil.
Not much makeup needed. No, that's an important. I'm glad you made that point because I think I might have misspoke there. It is important to distinguish between practical and then VFX, visual effects. That usually it's practical with some VFX layered on top of it now, which holds up a lot better than just your pure CGI stuff, because that as soon as the technology advances, it looks like crap to people. So I think that I mean, I don't know. I just watched a few clips on YouTube in preparation for this, and I thought, I'm like, damn, like that. Tim Curry, I thought it looked pretty good.
I mean, it's got the fog, it's got the smoke, it's got those Ridley Scott tight shots on people with amazing lighting and pushing you into there. And the funny thing is I think when he doesn't use it, you get sucked in, and that's where you're going to get the bang or the scare because when it's just the lighting, not focused or anything else, like a more saturation, you start leaning in, and that's where it gets you with the bang. The anticipation of it is just uncanny. That's what he's really great at.
Yeah, and he's really good at just, subverting the expectations of using, usually colors like blue that are calming colors. He does this in Black Hawk Down. He'll use those during times of trauma, and then he will use, those earthy greens, and he will subvert everything that you know about warm colors and use cold colors to comfort you, and warm colors during times of more danger, or when the Rangers are in, when they get in their one location for the night. There's like this odd little mix with the tones there, like this semi, it's just slightly different enough to let you know that they're not safe, but they're safer than they were when they were just out on the street,
On the
like,
street.
yeah. So it's like this subliminal stuff, it's all of this stuff that you subconsciously take in, and with visual mediums you need that, because in a book, when everybody bitches like, oh, the books are way more detailed, I'm like, that's because they can tell you what people are thinking, unless you want a voiceover, so you have to use these tools of color
Right.
palettes.
You can't translate a first person narrative into a storyboard. It doesn't work because what's going on in their head is never going to be conveyed. That's a problem that people had with Katniss in the first Hunger Games. Like, well, I'm like, of course it's adapted, and they have to have somebody to interact with and give her dialogue that's not in the books, because she's got to convey her thoughts in that dialogue of what's going on in her head, and you can't do that in the first person narrative.
If they want, the Outlander is one of the best representations of this being done. For me, that it doesn't work all that well. It's just like, if it's a book, it's a book. Who else could be better at being me than myself? The books are the books, the show are the show, the movie the movie. So yeah, I think it's really important to touch on these things, because that's what a director does. And yes, a cinematographer, but a director is working with them. They're lighting people. They're working with them. There's one consistency that you can for sure point out, and it takes a little bit of an eye, but not much, and it is his tones and his palettes, because he really knows how to play with that and make it, like you just brilliantly said. Sometimes he'll hold back, and then when it pops, it pops. It's really just, it's a masterclass. So we see him go into a series of, I wouldn't say forgettable, but definitely not films that he's known for.
I would call these more studio productions. Like he did them because he had to do them, with one exception. I think he really liked one of these stories a lot. And that would be Black Rain being the big one. And that was his first collaboration with Hans Zimmer, the first of six. So after this movie, six more times they worked together for amazing scores and musicality and everything going on.
That had to be
Black
one of
Rain,
Zimmer's earlier works. It's 89. That might be one of his first. But
I think so. And then you get Thelma and Louise. I'm skipping over some, just because there's not a lot to talk about them. I mean, the one that you can pan the most is probably 1492. We'll talk about that one in a minute, I suppose. But
well, I think Thelma and Louise. I think we get Legend, which, as we just discussed, is a fun popcorn movie and it's a cult classic. Someone to Watch Over Me is, it's a fine film. Black Rain, I have not seen. I know it was something that you can see. I watched a few scenes from it in my research. You can definitely see that. You can see his technical prowess there. But Thelma and Louise was him not getting pigeonholed. This, I feel, it was a film that he made with that specifically in mind, of I'm going to do something really different. And that's,
you will not put me into a corner.
Yeah, baby can't be put in a corner. So yeah. I finally, I've been searching for the word pigeonholed since the beginning of this broadcast. If you guys can't tell, I finally remembered it. So yeah, because he doesn't want to get pinned. I've said corner and all that. You might hear a dub saying pigeonholed over when I'm trying to do that. But yeah, Thelma and Louise. It's a fun film. It's a serious story. He takes a light take on it. He's known for female empowerment. There is a little bit of discussion about his casting, since it was thought, like you said, that he did write Alien, but he didn't. So they're saying he didn't write with gender in mind. That was definitely supposed to be a male character that he puts Weaver in. That's fine. And
yeah, he made that call, and he had to fight for that call to put Sigourney Weaver into the role of Ripley. They wanted to make it a male, and he said, "I will not do this film with a male lead."
Yeah,
I mean, he had to fight the studio on it.
And I think that, I don't know, I wouldn't do that argument if I was going to, go and try to, like, with this cancel culture and say, oh, well, that's not real representation. It's like, well, then you're specifying gender roles and traits, like right away, if you're saying that it was written for a man and put to a woman, and that's not true. It's like, I don't get that argument. I think that he does show an interest, and he definitely makes efforts. Like you said, he fought for it to actually tell stories with female leads.
Because of what he did with Ripley and putting Sigourney Weaver in there with Ripley, it also paved the way for her to become the focal point of the rest of the story of Aliens. But, I mean, obviously he didn't direct Aliens or write on Aliens, but the second film, Ridley is a key, absolute critical key to what's going on inside of the space colony. And then keep going throughout the rest of the films, you're seeing Ripley's influence in all of it. And that speaks volumes of him fighting to make sure that he could have Sigourney Weaver play that role.
Yeah, and it definitely paves the way for more females to at least be action stars, and so forth. So, it is what it is. In retrospect, everything could be better, and everything. In retrospect, things don't hold up for 2 weeks these days, much less 20 years. So I think it was a good choice. Selma and Louise is a solid film. Brad, and look, you can kind of see a little bit of this. I don't want to make it all about the gender thing, but Brad Pitt's role is kind of a reverse of these expectations as well. He's the eye candy in this, right? Like, he plays what would usually be the sexy babe on a beach in that time, but he is there for eye candy. He really is. Sorry, Brad, you got objectified. I'm sure it launched your career. But you know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying anything wrong was done, but it's definitely a flip on the dynamic.
The hairdryer scene is still one of those iconic scenes in cinema. As soon as he pulls out that hairdryer, you know what movie it is.
Yeah. So it's a fun movie, and it's not a political statement or anything like that. It's just, hey, the dynamic there is definitely off the beating path for this time. So I think it works. Go ahead.
Interesting story.
Oh yeah, it's a very sad story, which he does add a lot of levity to. And I watched an interview. He said he struggled a lot with this. It makes sense, because what are you going to do with this story? You got to make a decision which way you're going with it. I think he rode the line pretty well, in my opinion. It is a tragic story.
I was thinking about a question you asked before we started filming. It was, what would be your talking points if you were giving somebody an elevator pitch to convince them to watch Ridley Scott films? And I'm gonna stop here because we're at Thelma and Louise, and this goes for everything back as well. When I say this, and it just made me think of it. If you enjoy complex and intelligent stories about the human condition, you need not look any further than Ridley Scott, because it's not pigeonholed. But that's the key to all of these movies, is his ability to highlight the human condition and the questions that remain. That's what he does.
It's brilliantly stated, because it speaks truth, that with the same in which we wonder in Blade Runner, if this artificial being is worthy of personhood, or poses you with the question of, so I feel that he's human, but if you tell me that he's not, then I will not treat him as one. That's why you leave it open-ended, because that's a problematic question, right? That's because it's like, well, wait, so you're waiting for me to tell you if this is a replicant or a human? You know what I mean? You're waiting for that. Like, so what do you think? How should you act? How should you act if you feel like it's just me giving it a title and being like, okay, fine.
Have you ever questioned the nature of your being?
Yeah, exactly. But it's it's an important thing. It's like, and if you gotta ask, does it matter? So I think that and still there's levity there's especially levity in times of when you're down in dire straits. There's always humor in life, no matter how bad it gets. So to have a real depiction of somebody's personal story, there is going to be love. It doesn't need to be all doom and gloom. All doom and gloom. Speaking about that 1492, just that if I had to murder one of these films, it would be that one. It is what it is. It's not great. It didn't age well. I don't think it was ever good. But I mean, come on, this is a pretty big filmography here. So let's get the guy.
Time that he worked with Jean Depardieu.
Yeah.
So
I just watched it recently. Some reason, like a year ago on Hulu, and I was like, damn, it's just bad all around. But I don't really. But for what it's worth,
it's not great.
Yeah, for what it's worth, it does look beautiful, right?
Yeah, if you're just watching for that and take the story out and take everything else out, but it's amazing. The film sets and pieces that they had in it were awesome.
By a painting, though, like, you know what I mean? Like, so
that's what it was.
What's that?
I said, yeah, it's pretty much exactly what it was. But then it goes from Christopher Columbus straight into White Squall, which is another a sea tale, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting that was the first jump.
He's like, well, I didn't get it with this one. Maybe I'll get it with this one. Unless there's something you want to say. I don't have anything on White Skull.
White Squall just honestly was okay for me. It was worth the watch. I mean, it's interesting. Once again, great characters, great story development, great everything else. It got. I don't think it really got panned that much. It was moderately successful at the box office. It wasn't a big blowout or anything, but it made its money and did what it did. But the big one that comes up at kind of the end of the 90s here is G.I. Jane.
Yes.
And that one was a really big story. And so going back to Ripley, like he had to fight and argue for it. He saw this script and was like, yes, we are going to do this. And he did it really well. It came out in, I think, 99 for, might have been
97.
98.
90.
I worked in a theater in high school, so I have to equate everything to when it came out.
I do the same thing, yeah.
Yeah.
But
but
because you were a Marine, correct?
Still am.
Oh, yes. Sorry. And so you, as somebody that is a serviceman, you like G.I. Jane. You know, I think it's a good movie. I don't think it comes under much controversy. I don't think it's hit the whole cancel culture thing.
I mean, it probably did at the time, but the way that they did it, how they did it, I think it was worthy. It was. I mean, it came out after Courage Under Fire, which was Denzel Washington and Meg Ryan about awarding the Medal of Honor to a female, which was the first time it's ever been done. And this is a fictitious story, but there has not been a female Medal of Honor recipient. That is true. And it talks about the Persian Gulf War, and she's a helicopter pilot who gets shot down, and her and her team stay behind enemy lines and fight and everything else. And it came out just shortly after that one. And G.I. Jane, Demi Moore plays the title role. And I think it's very accurate at the time of what's going on. And this is the second time that Demi Moore actually played a sailor, Richard Gere.
What is they play lawyers, right? We're talking about.
Yeah, they're gag lawyers. And I know this movie, and I cannot think of it. What the hell is it? I can do speeches from this movie, and I can't even.
Let me look it up. A Few Good Men.
There we go. Few Good Men. Wow, that was
in a lady, fellas. Yeah, that's where. But yeah, she plays a lawyer, right?
Yep, she plays a lawyer in that one, and the way that the politics worked in G.I. Jane are believable for the time. I think it's important, but this is also the starting of changing gender roles in combat. Roles, different MOSs at this time started. Military occupational specialty, your job in the military, we call it MOS. Combat arms MOSs at this time were just starting to open up to females. They started broadening that out, and we're still seeing part of that transition going through right now because we have females that are attending Ranger School. We have females that are attempting to complete School of Infantry course and the infantry leaders course at Quantico. And so, I mean, this is all kind of evolving from that. And this would have been a movie that these young airmen, sailors, Marines, and soldiers watched growing up. They would have seen this, especially females probably. And there's some stuff, personally, there's stuff I agree and disagree with in the movie. But overall, I mean, it's a good movie. It tells a story of what probably it would be like for the first female SEAL or attempting to become a SEAL. So I thought it was a good movie for what it was.
Oh yeah, I think it's a good movie, and I mean, I think it's a story of an underdog. It's an underdog story. So
exactly.
I think it's good that at least whether you agree they should be in these positions or not, you guys watching at home, at least there were some young girls watching this, and they saw a female playing this role. Art imitates life, life imitates art. So if they can do it, they at least never thought it was impossible. They can go out there and they can try.
They grew up seeing it, at least in film.
Yeah, it wasn't something that was just off limits for them. So now if they can do it, they can do it. So good. If they can. So moving on to if you can do it, Commodus couldn't. With Gladiator, we have a fictional tale about the Roman Empire. Commodus, the son of Marcus Aurelius. This is the one that I love this film. Obviously, I'm very entertained, but I'm a little bit surprised that he didn't actually utilize the actual true story of Commodus' sister because of his the way in which he puts females in that power dynamic of usually being quite the force to tangle with, and it's more of a submissive role there when his sister was quite
She
mischievous
was
and
more
kind
like
of
Cersei.
yeah, exactly. So but anyways, this is definitely a very entertaining film, and I would say that this is like his biggest
And
success besides Alien. I don't know.
this and Black Hawk Down would probably be the two biggest ones.
We look at how it's held up, it just is
Oh, it
uh,
stands the test of time.
yeah, I mean it's a masterclass. It again, I don't want to sound hyperbolic here, but this movie fires on all cylinders. Is it an accurate depiction of what happened? No, I don't really think that he went into this thinking I'm gonna tell the true tale about when, because Commodus
Yeah,
was
he's not. Oh, he doesn't
co-emperor.
tell.
He was a co-emperor with Marcus Aurelius for a number of years. He was inadequate. He did participate in gladiatorial matches. There's little semblance of truth here and there, but again, this is a medium for entertainment, and this definitely was entertaining. And I think that these characters and these archetypes are really beautifully done in this film. I don't think anybody needs to be convinced to watch Gladiator, but it's something that you can literally watch once a year and
And
enjoy
he's
every
totally
time.
credited with saving the sword and sandal genre of film, which he obviously grew up with. You go back to the original Spartacus, you know, seven slaves or seven gladiators. You know, these were
Hmm.
the 60s versions of these movies. And he certainly grew up with them and watching them, and probably was fascinated with them because it's swords, it's great, it's fun, it's in the Coliseum, they're fighting. He just did it so much better. I mean, it's just uncanny. But it's something that he probably loved growing up. I would love to ask him that question because I think the answer is probably yes. I mean, there's a whole slew of this type of movie back in the '60s: Sins of Rome, The Fallen Empire, Spartacus,
You had I
Gladiator.
Claudius. You had
Yeah,
series. Yeah, you had a lot more. Some of them were just straight to television, but you had a lot more. Like if you look back, because I've watched everything I can on Caesar, so I've watched some kind of shoddy 70s television series and or
yep.
British costume dramas. But one of the things you noted here, when I asked about if there's any misconceptions about Ridley's work, is that his films are too long, right?
Yeah, they kind of Blade Runner was the one that started that one. There was a couple of critics that called it Blade Crawler
Yeah.
because it's a very personal story, right? So I mean, it's a slow burn, is what we would call it now. It's a very slow burn,
What well, I
and
wanted
not
to
everybody likes that type of movie.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on that because I agree with you on it being a misconception. I actually think there's an argument for some of the more recent films being a little bit too fast with the pace. He's even been called a little bit too efficient, and he's kind of lost this. Now, if you do any type of film theory course or anything, you will watch a plethora of movies that I just sat there and I was like, why do I need to see this guy in the elevator? Okay, because like if a guy needs to get to like a building in downtown New York, they're gonna show that fella get in a cab, go down the cab, talk to the cab driver, get out, say hi to a ma'am on the street, get in there, walk through the foyer, you know what I mean? Get in an elevator, and you're like, Jesus, this is just one establishing shot would have done this. But also because he is such a masterful mind when he's creating atmosphere, and atmosphere matters a lot for your characters where they're at. This, I believe, is where this comes from because he spends a lot of time establishing, in my opinion, in an efficient way. It's not, I think that, yeah, as time has gone on, we've kind of, rushed this process and we don't establish, locations as well as we could. But I think he is a definite example, or at least used to definitely be an example of somebody that did this right. And I don't think it's drawn out. I think, with Black Hawk Down, you definitely feel like the vulnerability even when they're at their base. You see like that it's just right outside, right? It's like they're pretty much isolated, and then when they get in to the actual town, the city, you feel the city, you feel the danger looming, you feel everything. You have a sense of location, a sense
The
of
location
awareness.
becomes a character into itself.
Yeah, and that's
And,
important. It's not easy to do that.
Frank Miller's a master of it because that's what he did when he saved Daredevil. His run on Daredevil is absolutely uncanny because Hell's Kitchen lives and breathes in those stories, much like with Sin City.
Hmm.
Sin City into itself is living, breathing city. Watchmen is another one. It's the same kind of thing where the city is a character, and he uses it really well. The way the ship is a character in 1492, right?
Hmm.
Uh, White Squall, same thing. He makes you feel as if you are there, by the way that he operates everything, and it's unreal.
And when you look at, like, okay, we're both big fans of George R. R. Martin. Look at the time he takes with his prose, in which he relates everything, Winterfell, all these connections to character, not only in sentiment but even nature connections, all these analogies and metaphors that are used to really lay out where they're at, what it looks like, how long it took to get there. That's important in story. The way you do this in a visual medium is different. You don't get a voiceover that can, talk about the castle walls, like a mountain or this or that. You know what I mean? So you have to establish this. And in a film like Black Hawk Down, especially, you could feel very disoriented in a bad way, meaning like you're unaware. A lot of shaky cam could be going on. Like a lot of.
I was just going to say the shaky cam that he used in that was perfect, and I can't remember what came out first. Saving Private Ryan or Black Hawk Down?
I gotta say, I think it's Black Hawk Down. I think it's Black
Hawk Down came out first?
Don't quote me on that. I'll figure that out. I don't think Saving Private Ryan does shaky cam well. I think it's.
But it's only really in the first opening sequence that he does shaky cam on the D-Day landing, and I think it's done very well for what that is meant to convey.
Yeah.
And it's the chaos of battle and then the fog of war, and I think it displays it really well. And it's very violent, and it's a means to put you into the story that nobody is safe here. Yeah. And it does what it needs really well.
Yeah, and that's a valid point, because that's what I was kind of getting at, is that you have to establish that a sense of stability. Story is a series of change in which we're looking to be stabilized within. So you have to put people on tilt, is what I call it. And using shaky cam will put you on tilt. But the just doing this nonstop, like a Bourne film, which are fun films, but these fights are happening in a fucking bedroom, and you can't. Karate happened and gunshots. Besides that, I don't really know what else. Like, and then the protagonist walks out. Okay, so that's where we're at. No, like in Black Hawk Down, you have an understanding. You can't probably map out the grid of that city, but you have a definite understanding. He does this in a number of different ways, which we could go into for hours and hours. But the point is, he's taking time for a reason. It's not just to chew up scenery. It is to establish these locations, because, like you said, and it is a cliche, but locations are characters. So we need to understand this, and I think he's brilliant at it. So that would be my response to that criticism about his films being too long. Go watch yourself a film from the 40s or 50s, and you be waiting on the elevator for all 40 floors.
Yeah. Complete exposition. That's all you get the entire time. And they're classic, they're iconic for a reason. There's a reason film students should see it. And at the same point in time, it's not that entertaining.
Yeah, you have to understand that, hey, this is the beginning of this medium, and now it's advanced. So I think that Ridley, I just saw, I'll have to cite it, because it is an article I read about him being too efficient, and he's kind of lost a little bit of that patience. And I think you can see that in the latter films like Robin Hood. I really enjoyed, but felt like the pacing was off a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, I think that maybe he's become too efficient. And it's important to note when we talk about All right. So when we're moving on to where he's at, essentially now, he's had a number of films that got mixed reviews. I don't know about if you have any opinions on Prometheus or Covenant or anything like that.
I had some issues with Prometheus. I wish they would have done just a couple of things to make that movie make a lot more sense. Especially with the engineers. I wish they would have done a little bit more with that and the finding of the engineer. That would have been nice.
I think
Last Crusade, Kingdom of Heaven, probably topical at the time. In 2005 is like right before the surge in Iraq. So, again, history becoming relevant in modern time, and that's a key one right there. Kingdom of Heaven very much might as well be an allegory for what was going on in Iraq at the time.
And I think that is both the virtue of this film and its downfall. First off, this is a beautiful film. This is a really fun film to watch. But when you do, I think he kind of stepped in a little bit on this one. It's just my personal opinion, because a lot of themes here are things that are going to be controversial. You're dealing with, real historical figures, but real historical figures that were part of the Crusades. So obviously the Hollywood thing at the time was to kind of shit on the West and glorify the East. The depictions of Balon were not accurate by any means, and I don't really look to film to teach me things. I look to film to inspire me to learn, but I can see why people have issues with the depiction of these historical figures, and I think it's a beautiful, beautiful film. I understand why it was made at the time. And I think that this is another example of him having multiple cuts, because the cut that is released that's much longer is much better. But also, you definitely have a whole Christians are filthy, dumb, stupid, and the East is good, perspective on this. And the Crusades are very, very complicated. On some fronts, it was a defensive war. On some fronts, it was a defensive war for those, in France, and in some fronts, it was, people defending their faith or whatever. It's very, just like all things, very, very complicated. It's kind of when you dip your toes into that water, you're asking for trouble. I really enjoy the film because I'm able to separate myself from all that. I've listened to a series of podcasts from people that are all about the Templars and all of the Crusade years and different aspects of it, and a lot of them really, really go to town on that film. But it's an entertaining film, and like you said, it's pretty much allegory, but it's kind of risky to take historical events and turn them into allegory for current events. I think that's kind of the issue that you run into there. Like, it would have been better suited to maybe leave out like historical things for that, but really entertaining film. And again, I don't think he was trying to, I can't imagine people have that much of a misunderstanding of what happened, to depict things and be like, oh, I thought I did it right. You know what I mean? I mean, come on. Like, so I think it was just meant to be what it was meant to be, which is entertaining. Then you have A Good Year, which is just it was a good movie, but the only thing that's consistent with that, it's got Russell Crowe.
According to Rupert Murdoch, but let's talk about Rupert Murdoch really quick for telling everybody in a board meeting that this movie was a flop. This is also the guy that canceled Firefly.
Yeah.
Case closed.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Rupert Murdoch, watch Succession, and that's pretty much based off of the Murdochs. So yeah, Good Year is it's a good film. But it's got Russell Crowe. That's what's kind of brilliant about this filmography here. And let's also remember that he has it's called Free Scott. Scott Free Productions, I believe, is the name.
Scott Free Productions, yeah, that's him and his brother.
Yeah. So they are making films to make money because it is a business as well. So they are turning out, some just fun movies, some easygoing movies. And then you have American Gangster, one of my favorite films. He came into this, I think, as the third director, and was able to bring in Crowe and Denzel. I believe weren't even attached to this until he came in. So that shows you the sway he has with them. But I think brilliant, and really sets it apart, as well as doing a twist on this mafia-esque film, right? Like, it's just different.
Frank Lucas, notorious gangster from Harlem.
Yeah, he actually, where I live right now, unfortunately, Goldsboro, North Carolina, he actually originally is from here.
He was born there. And that's why he brought all his family up from New York. And that's when they started running the dope out of Vietnam, all the heroin out of Vietnam into North Carolina, and then driving it up to New York to distribute.
Yeah.
It was a system that was very profitable.
Yeah. And, still a lot of heroin in Goldsboro now. And again, that's another, situation which you have the real life characters it's based off, but events are not story. You take events and then you tell a story within them. Again, there's, not, Frank Lucas is also one of those figures that's kind of, it's a polarizing issue because something
because he did do a lot for the community. He also did a lot against the community. If you want to talk about the drug use and the epidemic, I mean, this was all like before crack cocaine was introduced, and so this was the drug of the day.
Yeah,
and you can talk about it. I mean, he did what he did, but he also tried to do as much as he could for the youth and for everybody else in Harlem. So he was kind of the half and half guy, right?
Yeah, and there's, he's not all that reliable. Bumpy Johnson, you credit more like for what it's worth, actual information about what he did. But no, Frank Lucas definitely, made a lot of money in dirty ways and tried to wash his hands by doing good deeds. I guess to some point we can all relate to that, just not on the level of shipping in mass amounts of heroin.
So, that level, though.
Yeah, but the human condition we get. So yeah, I think, it's a brilliant insight. And then one of my favorite films, actually, and this, again, was not aware it was Ridley, Body of Lies. I love this film. It's got some...
DiCaprio. Great one.
Yeah, and Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe plays the handler, so used to be in the field. DiCaprio's actually on the field, so like, it's that Machiavellian aspect of Crowe's doing things that Leo doesn't agree with. And I think it actually has a pretty good. It would seem like it was shoehorned in, but I actually like the romantic aspect of that story. The nurse that gives him like his tetanus and rabies shots that he starts up
Right.
like a budding relationship with, and you'd be like, I bet like if I read that screenplay, I'd be like, seems weird to kind of like this heavy on it, but it's actually one of the things that sticks out to me, and I kind of think it's a cool aspect of it, you know what I mean? And it's got a nice little message to it, but I just think it's a good romance. Well, especially for that time, this is 2008, when, as you well know, a time that's heavy in conflict over in
Yep.
that region. So when is it not? Robin Hood 2010, kind of know my take. I was really excited for this one. It kind of let me down. I think it feels like it was like 3/4 of a movie, but it didn't start at a beginning, and it definitely didn't end at an end.
And right, yeah.
It's like where there's a bigger movie or a smaller movie somewhere. I don't know which one it is, but I feel like the pacing is off on this.
It is. It didn't have a lot of buy-in either. Like the characters weren't as sympathetic, and these are characters that we know. Like we understand the story of Robin of Locksley. We understand who Maid Marian is. We know who the Friar is. We get all these things, right? And in this one, they tried to tell it a little bit different, which is fine, awesome. I don't want to, have the same story of Robin Hood, I guess, but it didn't depart far enough to where it was their own, and it didn't end in any kind of satisfying way, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was of it and a part of it at once, and it just I feel like you can't always walk that line and not be successful. It's still a fun movie. I just was really excited because I'm into a lot of we're into this type of, obviously a Robin Hood movie. It's gonna be like I was pretty hyped for this movie. I was like very excited, and then I watched it and I was like,
Which is the better movie, this Robin Hood or Robin Hood Prince of Thieves with Kevin Costner and Morgan Freeman?
I gotta actually say, I like the gritty feel to, Ridley's, because they do show that this most likely would be somebody coming back from Crusades. If this were to be a depiction of these times, this would make the most sense. There's a sense of realism. But besides that, man, like even with the cheesiness of the Kevin Costner one, I gotta say, like speaking high concept, man, that's a better movie. Like that's a better story. It's a more complete story. I feel it was just, it didn't, like, I think you put it perfectly. It didn't stray far enough, and it was half on a leash. I don't know. Really excited for this film for some reason. I don't know if the marketing got to me, but it's also right up my alley. I was like, I like this. It's a biblical, this is something that might have really happened. It's also a biblical story. It's got actors in it that I like. Maybe not cast the best, but again, kind of a letdown for me with Gods and Kings, but still very it's a good looking film.
It's smart. Its sets are brilliant. I mean, it throws back to like Gladiator. Like those set pieces are just absolutely gorgeous, and the use of light, the warm colors for Elysium, you can see that in play in here in this film as well. And then the very very bright and stark, harsh white colors in the arena that they use in Gladiator. This one is kind of lit the same way, and that kind of starts becoming a trademark of his films. Is the ability to use those colors like that, kind of almost in a Stanley Kubrick fashion, but it's done with color tones as well. And he really, this is kind of a mastery of that. It's beautiful film. It really took a beating for hiring only white actors to play all these more Middle Eastern actors, which is unfortunate. But I mean, it kind of, they have to make a movie that's going to sell too, and I don't know if a bunch of unknowns would have sold this movie. I mean, you still had Ben Kingsley in there and a whole bunch of others, but
that's that thin line. I mean, Matt Damon's hired by China to do films over there to play traditionally Asian, but I mean, this wasn't a smart move. I mean, it almost seems like they went out of their way here to make it all white. It is, but I like what you're saying about the lighting, because there is, he plays with earthy tones better than I've seen anybody play with. Usually it's like, like we talk about like Blade Runner, which is notorious for, these neon lights that just pop, these oranges, these blues, right? But that are contrasting with that dim gray cityscape, right? But then there's that pop of light either with the umbrellas that they got out there all the time because it's always raining. So, but he's also able to do it in landscapes that look real. meaning
Yep.
like, you know what I mean, like earthy tones and stuff. Where it's very,
Heaven, Gladiator. I mean, those are kind of the ones where he is playing with those earthy tones. Even Black Hawk Down,
mhm.
and we haven't really even touched on that movie at all, but he used it really well in Black Hawk Down to convey, violence or feeling sheltered and protected in a defensive position. The palette changes in waves of what's going on with the movie, and it's really brilliant to watch.
Yeah, he uses that green, that odd, it's almost a mix between a gray and a green, but then he goes to the night vision as well,
Yep.
and we're seeing things, and we're not seeing reds, we're seeing a lot of greens. And then, like I said earlier about the blues that he uses, in blue is supposed to be comforting, but he uses cold colors to comfort and warm, vice versa, to show you danger. So if you establish rules at the beginning, which he does brilliantly, at their base, and he establishes subconsciously to you where they're okay, where they're in less danger, more danger, you can pretty much set your own rules, but you're still going against the grain, and it really sticks out, and it really works well, because I mean, it's this dusty, smoky mess of this city, right? And you still feel like it's not, because it's all fun and games to say, well, there's no visibility for the soldiers during the time, so we can just make it so nobody can see. I mean, it's a film, so you need us to be able to see what's happening. You know what I mean? So it's like walking that fine line of like really giving justice to the dire straits in which these soldiers were in, but making it able to be viewable, right? Because
Yep.
like you said with Saving Private Ryan, yeah, they need to do the shaky cam to really, obviously D-Day was not no stroll in the park, so you got to really convey that, but you also have to do it in a coherent way. So it's like controlled chaos, I guess. I don't know.
It's exactly what it is because that's combat
Yeah,
right there.
I don't know, but yeah, I'm just happy that you agree. I'm here this soldier. So, yeah, and what is that old saying about combat, that it's like it's it's all boredom, and then it's like this sentiment about it there being nothing to
Hours
do.
of boredom and moments of sheer terror.
Yeah, and I think that really hits home, and I think that like Black Hawk Down, I feel like that kind of embraces that sentiment, and like
Yeah.
Band of Brothers also is a show that kind of embraces that, like they're in their foxholes a lot,
Yeah,
and it's
Spielberg did great with that, and same with Saving Private Ryan. The Pacific did great with that too. Completely different war from what was going on in the European theater, and I think they did well with it.
yeah, it's just, I think it's important to convey that it gives you time with the characters, so you can tell fictional stories with their dialogue and all that. I'm currently reading a book about one of the people that were adapting for the Band of Brothers. There's multiple screenwriters, and they talk a lot about how you have to make up fictional stories within, else you'll just lose it. Like, you got to stick
The
to the
micro
event.
stories.
Yeah, it's like they're not gonna. What are you gonna do? Go and get every single thing that gonorrhea said? You know what I mean? like you're not gonna be able to obtain that information. Try to embody, embrace who it is. But I think that The Martian is the standout film, in my opinion. For, if anybody says that Ridley Scott can't make a good film anymore, I say to you, sir, and I challenge you to a duel. But I also
How
say The
nicely
Martian.
done.
Yeah, The Martian. Yeah, good. It's
It's
excellent.
amazing. Another book adaptation that they did really, really well with. Uh, it plays into the whole space race that's going on now. It's very topical for the time. I mean, Elon Musk is trying to fire his way to Mars with rocket after rocket after rocket, catching them back and returning them back to Earth, and it keeps going. They're talking about mining Mars, which I'm all about at the moment because of Red Rising. It's just it was a brilliant movie, and I'm not the biggest Matt Damon fan, uh, but that one he started. It was great.
Yeah, and I almost kind of hold it to the same level as Castaway, because you're dealing with a film that's primarily just one person stranded, right? Um,
Correct.
he doesn't have a
And
Wilson. He just
fight
has,
the will to survive.
yeah, he doesn't have Wilson. He's just got Vicodin with his potatoes, which is a decent, give and take there. But I really enjoyed it, and I thought that it was it embodied his work, it embraced his work, what he's good at, but it also was a very well-paced film. And I think that is the argument that I have, besides Exodus, which I just think another one that kind of fell off. But hey, when you do so many things, they're not all going to be winners. But the pacing seemed to be on. He took his time. with
Yep.
The Martian. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
It was a slow burn, but it was important to drive the character development. That's what he did a lot of in that film. It was really well done.
how would you not like the story is a slow burn? Like if you don't
Yeah,
establish that he's been
you can't
there
get
forever.
around
Yeah, it's like, well, yeah, it wasn't really all that long. Just do a black screen 7 years later. Yeah, you know what I mean, or however long it was. Now we had all the money in the world, which Spacey Gate kind of crushed, which is unfortunate because that was a pretty interesting concept. But of course, there was a whole lot of scandal at this time with Kevin Spacey and others. But we have in 2020 The Last Duel. Now, this
Yep.
is interesting. Written by Ben Affleck. And let me just say, back in the day, you used to think Ben Affleck sat on the couch, drinking beer and smoking weed, and Matt Damon was the brains that was writing Good Will Hunting and all that. I have to say, my opinion over the years has changed to Ben Affleck. He's written and directed some pretty. I like The Town. The Town is good. I think he might be the brains. I mean, I don't know.
Kevin Smith.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I got you.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I love Kevin Smith though. I like one of my favorite directors ever. I love Kevin Smith too.
Yeah. So The Last Duel is going to depict. It's not going to be a sequel, but it's going to depict another. I believe it's French nobility. It's now that this probably won't make you happy. And it's questionable for me as well. Damon's in it though. Matt Damon is going to star in this, which is
this is if Ridley Scott was to die tomorrow from COVID, his career would be completely bookended from The Duelist to The Last Duel.
I don't want him to die, but I like the idea of
the bookending. I don't either.
But do we Matt Damon? It just seems like such an odd choice for the casting.
After The Martian, maybe.
Yeah, I want to hear his French accent. I don't want to
hear his French accent either. All I think of is Arriba Dark Che. I know that's Italian and not French, but I'm quoting Inglourious Bastards.
No, I know. Yeah, Brad Pitt. Yeah, in there with his what is that? A Montana accent that he's got there.
Was he from Montana? I can't remember.
It's something mountainous. It's like it's a. Which is not probably the proper verb, but it's I think it's like Montana or something. Like it's supposed to be he's from like like somewhere in Appalachia or somewhere wherever that is. I don't know, some mountains. I don't know. I'll figure it out. But yeah, I mean, let's share some last sentiment here. First off, thank you, and I will provide some of these insights on Patreon that JR was so kind to do. This has been such a fun project for me to do, and it helps me be reinvigorated to go watch these films, go look for things in films that I haven't noticed before. It has really been like another film theory class, and I'm still doing it. I got Robert in Deep Geek that'll do Token next week, and I'm considering taking a week off. I need to get my Dark video out, and I want to convert the first 10 episodes. This is number 9. Next one will be 10, do them for a podcast, because I know they go a little bit long, but it's kind of hard to talk about these filmmakers and storytellers without at least taking about an hour and a half. So JR has been so great in this because a lot of this, almost all of this right here is all you, brother. You came prepared, and you have shed some light on Ridley for me, and I hope that we have shed some light on Ridley for everybody, because I think that his films, it'll surprise you. Just look up at his filmography and you'll be like, holy shit, that is a Ridley film. And I think that's
even in doing the research for this, I was like, holy wow, I didn't realize he directed that. Like, wow.
And that's fun, and that's the thing, like we try to identify things that you can pick out. He's not as easy as say Kubrick or Spielberg, with Spielberg being all up in your face.
He's so adaptable that sometimes it's really hard to figure it out, and that is a credit to him, in my opinion. He can literally do it all with anything. Like, he's the jack of all trades.
In the longevity of his career is
jack of all trades.
Is a testament to it. The longevity of this guy was born in 1937. I mean, yeah. So I mean, come on. So you got to be a jack of all trades to do it. And look at Kingdom of Heaven, Exodus, and Gladiator. you could easily pigeonhole those
Almost a
films to be the
trilogy
same
in
things.
themselves.
All completely different though. Look at Black Hawk Down and Body of Lies. I'd say there's a lot of connections there with the helicopter shots and stuff like that. But besides that, still a completely different situation, completely different film. That's why I think the romance is kind of so enticing in that, because it really sets it apart. Obviously, there's no romance in Black Hawk Down, which is important because it's not romanticize the situation. And thank God
Yeah, it's not the typical World War II story.
yeah.
You know, falling in love with the nurse. That's not what this is.
I like what Hoot says at the end, to kind of to bookend it here about, people ask why he keeps going back and like why he does what he does, right? Like, and it's maybe it's, I'm not a serviceman, so I don't know. I found it to be enticing, but I thought it was a nice sentiment, and like, that like hopefully people like me can understand a little bit better through that medium.
What Hoot says in the end of the film is absolutely true. I know it was true for myself. I know it was true for a lot of my teammates. I know it was true for a lot of Marines that, this is what we do. This is our profession, so they don't ever have to know what this is.
Yeah.
And then being everybody in the U.S., we don't want you to have to know what this is. That's why we fight here and not on our own land.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought that was appropriate because it's again, how can we ever know unless you're there? So, I thought that, yeah, again, and that's a good example of dialogue that most likely was not actually said to somebody, but that sentiment speaks true. We have a veteran and a service member right here that can validate that. So I appreciate it. I appreciate you on all levels. Go to Geek Chat 1, and you're going to be doing. You've got a few projects coming up. You've got
Rising.
Yep. And just
Rising.
tell everybody
If
where
you
they can find you.
if you guys get access to the Audible through Justin's account, get Red Rising. I'm telling you, the first book I will say is a slow burn, but it's not terribly slow. It's not super slow. If you get through the first book, I think you'll be hooked, because then you got to know what happens next. And I burned through the series in like 6 days.
Oh yeah, see, and I'll pledge to get it too, so I can further enjoy your content, my friend. And hey, everybody's looking for something new to read, right?
Right. Mark my words. When this comes to TV, and it will, this series will be the next Game of Thrones.
There we go.
That's how complex it is. That's how big it is. It's absolutely astonishing. It's really great.
Well, I can't thank you enough, guys. Check it out. All the links, and there'll be images over this and visuals of your site and all that. So hopefully go check out JR. Hopefully check out my Audible link, and make sure to subscribe if you want to support creativity. I got a Patreon. I know JR's got a Patreon. I know $3 a month makes a hell of a difference to me. Thank you so much, JR. And yeah, we will be back next week with Robert from In Deep Geek, and then we might have a 1 week lull, and we'll continue doing these, and we'll have them in podcast form soon. Thank you, guys, and thank you, brother.